Hello there, dear listener. We hope you're enjoying this lovely discussion. If you're not already aware, this show is part of a podcast network called KWAZ Radio, a Pan-African Nationalist and Garveyite network committed to showcasing the rich and varied thoughts of African people. We have an exciting lineup of shows that we think you'll enjoy, including
the Bitter Medicine Podcast.
I think black people acquire too much buy-in. Like, we constantly have to sell black people on things that are beneficial to black people.
The Pro-Black Perspective Podcast.
I'm fearful that our people are not really studying how to get ahead, and we're kind of, continually staying behind.
The Harsh Reality Podcast.
To me, it don't matter. I think people are so dumbed down, it wouldn't matter what you reveal to them. They still are in the matrix. They're in the simulation. They're going to keep doing what they did. They lemmings. So to me, it don't matter, man.
The Learning Curve Podcast.
Sexual access has never given you economic empowerment. The only person who has ever been economically empowered by a sexual relationship is the wasp and his woman.
The Cathedra Cheek Show.
When we start rising up to fight for our own, I guarantee you they'll stop doing what they're doing. I guarantee you they would have let their brother go. They was waiting to see what black folks was going to do.
Brother Bakari Podcast.
Black people love to claim folks that hate them, right? They're a slave master, and they are ashamed of who they really are.
The Forecast Radio.
Like, if you pray to the same deity as, like, your enemy, and that God blesses your enemy more than you may want to reconsider who you praying to,
And Tanzan, African Mind.
Africans generally are welcoming of everyone. Sometimes, to my consternation, I think that they should be less, welcoming.
If you love our podcast network, we would be grateful if you could rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on social media, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and check out our website at www.kwazradio.com for more information. Thank you for tuning in. And now, back to the program.
All right. Welcome back. I know it was been a long time, right? All right. So we're just gonna finish this book, chapter 11. Let's leave this. Well, it's not in August, but let's leave this in August, pretty much. Chapter 11, the mechanics of propaganda. By the way, I'm joined by my son right now. My son's here, so yeah, he's gonna be quiet though, I guess. But yeah, so the media by which special pleaders transmit their messages to the public through propaganda include all the means by which people today transmit their ideas to one another. The mechanics. There is no means of human communication which may not also be a means of deliberate propaganda, because propaganda is simply the establishing of reciprocal understanding between an individual and a group. So again, look at this. So we reached the last chapter, and he finally kind of defines propaganda, or maybe he defined it before, but this is this is the definition. Now, I don't use this definition. Okay, my definition is very different. Like I said, I'm an author myself. You guys can check out my 5 books at this point over here. I use a different definition. My definition is propaganda is, I can't remember right now, but something along the lines of like trying to convince people who their allies and their enemies are. Okay? Regardless though, of course my definition is more in the war context, but what he's saying is simply this: propaganda is establishing a reciprocal understanding between an individual and a group. And that's why I kind of told this woman, don't put your religion in your propaganda unless the purpose of your propaganda is to tell people that you're religious. Okay? Unless the purpose of your propaganda is to tell people that you're religious, don't put that in your propaganda. You know? So what you want in your propaganda is something that appeals to your consumer. You know? So like for instance, some of the videos, like for instance, the video on what do you call it? Photography skills, right? I showed her some video of photography skills. And in the background, you could hear music that's kind of trendy, you know? So these are trendy tricks. Now, you could just as easily play classical music. Okay? And then you're just like, oh, this is how we do it in the classical scene. Right? This is how we... Like, a lot of it's portrayed, or you could play hip-hop music. And you could say, this is what kind of techniques that we would use in a hip-hop video. You know? And of course, you're showing the same techniques, but the music itself is putting that reciprocal understanding. And so if you want to communicate to your audience, oh yeah, this is the context in which you should view this. And again, I point this out mostly because, you know, like I said, video game propaganda. In video games, you will add sound effects, you will add music, and you will add art. It's not just coding. Most of the game is in the music, the thing, and I don't really appreciate it as much, honestly. You know, because again, I'm a game designer, but I'm not really, you know, big on the music scene per se, right? I don't appreciate it as much, but a lot of times you'll see people advertising video games and say, oh, and the composer for this other video game is helping us, participating. The composer, so on and so forth. So it's to say that really a lot of people are moved by music in these video games. More than, you know, I tend to appreciate. But anyway, because, you know, me personally, I like the systems and all that kind of stuff. But it's not to say that I don't recognize video games. You know, it's not to say that I don't recognize movies. Hold on a second. My son is telling me. Oh, he doesn't have it. Okay. Alright, so the important point to the propagandists, let me just tell them to download. Alright, so the important point to the propagandists is that the relative value of the various instruments of propaganda and their relation to the masses are constantly changing. So the important point to the propagandists is that the relative value of the various instruments of propaganda, so as to say, Twitter, text, newspapers, phones, phone calls, whatever. The various instruments of propaganda and their relation to the masses are constantly changing. Right now, TikTok is big. Okay, right now, TikTok is big. I'll put it that way. But it wasn't necessarily big. You know, before Elon took over Twitter, Twitter was kind of big too. Not as big as TikTok, but still big, right? If he is to get full reach for his message, he must take advantage of these shifts of values the instant they occur. 50 years ago, the public meeting was a propaganda instrument par excellence. Today it's difficult to get more than a handful of people to attend a public meeting unless extraordinary attractions are part of the program. The automobile takes them away from home. The radio keeps them in the home. The successive daily editions of the newspaper brings information to them in office or subway, and also they are sick of the ballyhoo of the rally. So again, public rallies, public meetings, no longer a thing. Okay? But again, it depends on where you are in this world. Like I told you guys, there are what did I say? There are places in this world, right? I told you guys about my favorite video ever. But there are places in this world where people have these open markets that people regularly attend, weekly markets, that you could probably get more community attention there than if you were to use TikTok to reach there. Okay? Because maybe not everybody has a smartphone, maybe not everybody's going to see your video, but most everybody's going to that community market. I've seen, beautiful woman in fact, but I've seen some beautiful people, or I've seen some people, right, walk into this market to just buy their eggs. Okay, to just buy eggs. Other people went to the market to buy shoes, whatever. You get a stand there. You try to get somebody's attention. Some people were sitting there for hours getting their hair done. It's just a real community, like the community just in and out in this small area, getting their regular groceries, getting whatever. And the fact that they were doing that kind of tells you that would be where you could speak to people. Okay, that would be where you could speak to people. And that's partly why certain businesses have cost more rent-wise than others, just because the locality is just that much more frequented, right? The potential for economic gain is that much more full and that much more realized, right? So instead, there are numerous other media of communication, some new, others old, but so transformed that they have become virtually new. The newspaper, of course, remains always a primary medium for the transmission of opinions and ideas, in other words, for propaganda. Now again, he says always not the case anymore, right? It was not many years ago that newspaper editors resented what they call the use of the news column for propaganda purposes. Some editors would even kill a good story if they imagined its publication might benefit anyone. This point of view is now largely abandoned. Today, the leading editorial office takes the view that the real criterion governing the publication or non-publication of its matter, which comes to the desk, is its news value. So again, the commercialization of journalism has been a thing since the 1920s. The newspaper cannot assume, nor is it its function to assume the responsibility of guaranteeing that what it publishes will not work out to somebody's interest. There is hardly a single item in any daily paper, the publication of which does not or might not profit or injure somebody. That is the nature of news. What the newspaper does strive for is that news which it publishes shall be accurate, and since it must select from the mass of news materials available, that it should be of interest and importance to a large group of its readers. But again, now the commercialization is real. Okay, the commercialization is real. It's in its editorial column. The newspaper is a personality. Hold on a second. Sorry. All right. Its editorial column, the newspaper, is a personality commenting upon things and events from its individual point of view. But in its news columns, the typical modern American newspaper attempts to reproduce, with due regard to news interests, the outstanding events and opinions of the day. It does not ask whether a given item... Okay. Alright, it does not ask whether a given item is propaganda or not. What is important is that it be news. And in the selection of news, the editor is usually entirely independent. In the New York Times, to take an outstanding example, news is printed because of its news value and for no other reason. The Times editors determine with complete independence what is and what is not news. They brook no censorship. They are not influenced by any external pressure, nor swayed by any values of expediency or opportunism. The conscientious editor on every newspaper realizes that his obligation to the public is news. The fact of his accomplishments makes it news. If the Public Relations Council can breathe the breath of life onto... Let me make sure I'm getting recorded. If the Public Relations Council can breathe the breath of life into an idea and make it take its place among other ideas and events, it will receive the public attention it merits. There can be no question of his contaminating news at its source. He creates some of the day's events which must compete in the editorial office with other events. Often the events which he creates may be specifically acceptable to the newspaper's public, and he may create them with the public in mind. If important things of life today consist of transatlantic radio phone talks arranged by commercial telephone companies, if they consist of inventions that will be commercially advantageous to the men who market them, if they consist of Henry Fords with epic-making cars, then all this is news. The so-called flow of propaganda into the newspaper office of the country may simply, at the editor's discretion, find its way to the wastebasket. The source of the news offered to the editor should always be clearly stated and the facts accurately presented. So again, it's the journalism has, it's no longer like this. Okay, it is now the flow of propaganda may not find its way to the basket. There's a lot of fake news being reported. Okay, fake news, international news, if you will. That benefits certain international or internationalist policies. And that's just a new thing. But the important thing is that these organizations, they put themselves into the public consciousness as clearly stated, facts accurately represented. So there's that propaganda in itself. Like, I could tell you, for instance, there's a story about, oh man, you know what happened, certain days or whatever, and it's like the UN verified it, but the UN has its own interests. So situations of the magazines at the present moment from the propagandist point of view is different from that of the daily newspapers. The average magazine assumes no obligation, as the newspaper does, to reflect the current news. It selects its material deliberately in accordance with a continuous policy. It is not like the newspaper, an organ of public opinion, or the magazine, but tends rather to become a propagandist organ, propagandizing for a particular idea, whether it be good housekeeping or smart apparel or beauty and home decoration or debunking public opinion or general enlightenment or liberalism or amusement. One magazine may aim to sell health, another English gardens, another fashionable menswear, another Nietzschean philosophy. In all departments in which the various magazines specialize, the Public Relations Council may play an important part, for he may, because of his clients' interests, assist them to create the events which further their propaganda. A bank, in order to emphasize the importance of its women's department, may arrange to supply a leading women's magazine with a series of articles and advice on investments written by a woman expert in charge of this department. The women's magazine, in turn, will utilize this new feature as a means of building additional prestige and circulation. The lecture, once a powerful means of influencing public opinion, has changed its value. The lecture itself may be only a symbol, a ceremony. Its importance for propaganda purposes lies in the fact that it was delivered. Professor So-and-so, expounding an epic-making invention, may speak to 500 persons or only 50. His lecture, if it is important, will be broadcast. Reports of it will appear in the newspaper. Discussions will be stimulated. The real value of the lecture, from the propaganda point of view, is its repercussions to the general public. So again, like for instance, this presentation right now, this lecture, if you will, is not important if it doesn't reach. It's not broadcasted. In another world, listen to me. In another world, it would say there would be a magazine somewhere or a newspaper somewhere that will say Oni delivers a lecture series on the book Propaganda. He spoke of blah 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 blah, and it's available on YouTube. Okay. No, that's not a thing. It's not even a thing on social media. But at the same time, look at this. You can find a social media post saying, hey, this is what Tariq Nasheed just said. This is what Yvette Carnell just said. Oh my gosh, Yvette Carnell just dropped their podcast. Blah, 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 blah. And that's a thing too. Because it would appear on social media. In fact, I'll tell you guys this. I never watched the MCU, the Marvel universe, whatever. I never watched that stuff. But then I saw a conscious sister say, oh, the ending for, I think it was Endgame or something. It was so good. So surprising. And I said, okay, let me go watch that stuff. But that right there is propaganda. Okay? So the radio is at present one of the most important tools of the propagandist. Its future development is uncertain. Exactly. Nobody listens to radio anymore. Not nobody, but still. It may compete with the newspaper. I mean, you do if you're in a car, I guess. It may compete with the newspaper as an advertising medium. Its ability to reach millions of persons simultaneously naturally appeals to the advertiser. And since the average advertiser has a limited appropriation for advertising, money spent on the radio will tend to be withdrawn from the newspaper. To what extent is the publisher alive? I'm actually reading kind of fast because I have to go apparently. But anyway, to what extent is the publisher alive to this new phenomenon? It is bound to come close to American journalism and publishing. Newspapers have recognized the advertising potentialities of the companies that manufacture radio apparatus and of radio stores, large and small, and newspapers have accorded to the radio in their news and feature columns an important relative to the increasing attention given by the public to radio. At the same time, certain newspapers have brought radio stations and linked them up with their news and entertainment distribution facilities, supplying these two features over the air to the public. So again, you can combine multiple things. Come close to American. So newspapers have, you have BBC or CNN on the radio now, right? It is possible that newspaper chains will sell schedules of advertising space on the air or on paper. Not possible. This is what happened. Newspaper, and again, you got to look at this book as advising the Americans, because a lot of Americans are going to read this book. Newspaper chains will possibly contract with advertisers for circulation on papers and over the air. There are, at present, publishers who sell space in the air and in their columns, but they regard the two as separate ventures. Large groups, political, racial, sectarian, economic, or professional, are tending to control stations of propaganda as their point of view. Or is it conceivable that America may adopt the English licensing system under which the listener, instead of the advertiser, pays? Okay? The listener pays in the English license. You see what I'm saying? Like Netflix, okay? But again, and of course, it is already in the English system. So it's not like it's a new invention that he came up with. He says the English do this. And of course, you see racial control of stations, the propaganda is their point of view. So whether the present system is changed, the advertiser, the propagandist, must necessarily adapt himself to it. Whether in the future airspace will be sold openly as such, or whether the message will reach the public in the form of straight entertainment and news, or as special programs for particular groups, propagandists must be prepared to meet the conditions and utilize them. The American motion picture is the greatest unconscious carrier of propaganda in the world today. It is a great distributor for ideas and opinions. So this is the movies. The motion, and look at this. The greatest unconscious carrier of propaganda, the movies. It's not me saying it. It's not, the guy on the street corner saying it. This is the author of propaganda, Edward Bernays, saying it, right? I think Freud's nephew or something, right? The motion picture can standardize the ideas and habits of a nation, you see? Because pictures are made to meet market demands. They reflect, emphasize, and even exaggerate broad popular tendencies, rather than stimulate new ideas and opinions. The motion pictures avail itself only of ideas and facts which are in vogue. As the newspaper seeks to purvey news, it seeks to purvey entertainment. Another instrument of propaganda is the personality. Has a device of the exploited personality been pushed too far? President Coolidge, photographed on his vacation in full Indian regalia, in company with full-blooded chiefs, was the climax of a greatly overreported vacation. Obviously, a public personality can be made absurd by misuse of the very mechanisms which help create it. Yet the vivid dramatization of personality will always remain one of the functions of the Public Relations Council. The public instinctively demands a personality to typify a conspicuous corporation or enterprise. There's a story that a great financier discharged a partner because he had divorced his wife. But what, asked the partner, has my private affairs to do with the banking business? If you are not capable of managing your own wife, was the reply, the people will certainly believe that you are not capable of managing their money, right? And of course, I heard a brother tell me similarly, right? The propagandist must treat personality as he would treat any other objective fact within his province. A personality may create circumstances as Lindbergh created goodwill between the United States and Mexico. Events may create a personality as the Cuban War created the political figure of Roosevelt. It is often difficult to say which creates the other. Once a public figure has decided what ends he wishes to achieve, he must regard himself objectively and present an outward picture of himself which is consistent with his real character and his aims. There are a multitude of other avenues of approach to the public mind, some old, some new as television. No attempt will be made to discuss each one separately. The school may disseminate information concerning scientific facts. The fact that a commercial concern may eventually profit from a widespread understanding of its activities because of this does not condemn the dissemination of such information. I know, I'm reading kind of fast, sorry. Provided that the student merits study of the parts of the student. If a baking corporation contributes pictures and charts to a school to show how bread is made, these propaganda activities, if they are accurate and candid, are in no way reprehensible, provided the school authorities accept or reject such offers carefully on their educational merits. It may be that a new product will be announced to the public by means of a motion picture of a parade taking place 1,000 miles away, or the manufacturer of a new jitney airplane may personally appear and speak in 1 million homes through radio and television. The man who would most effectively transmit this message to the public must be alert to make use of all the means of propaganda. So undoubtedly, the public, and I'm at the last page, right? Like 152 and 153, right? So undoubtedly, the public is becoming aware of the methods which are being used to mold its opinion and habit. If the public is better informed about the processes of its own life, it will be so much the more receptive to reasonable appeals to its own interests. No matter how sophisticated, how cynical the public may become about publicity methods, it must respond to the basic appeals because it will always need food, crave amusement, long for beauty, respond to leadership. Okay? The public will always need food, crave amusement, long for beauty, and respond to leadership. Okay? This is something you should let me see if I can highlight it. And again, like I said, I'm a little bit time consumed, but you gotta recognize, like sometimes you just gotta recognize beauty because blah blah blah. So if the public becomes more intelligent in its commercial demands, commercial firms will meet the new standards. If it becomes weary of the old methods used to persuade it to accept a given idea or commodity, its leaders will present their appeals more intelligently. Propaganda will never die out. Intelligent men must realize that propaganda is the modern instrument by which they can fight for productive ends and help to bring order out of chaos. So again, you've just got to remember this. These are the industries that you should keep in mind. Food, amusements, beauty, art, leadership. Okay? And again, amusement and art and beauty, whatever, these are video games. These are video games, in some respect, and of course books and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, thank you everybody for your time. This is the end of this book. I don't know what I'm going to do next. I don't think I'm going to read another book, but that's the end of this book. So appreciation for your time and your attention. Granted, I had 0 people watching, but that's fine. It's like 10 o'clock on a Monday, and I know everybody hates Mondays. So it was 10 a.m. now. But anyway, that's it. That's the end of the podcast. So thank you for your time. Ptah Htp, Uncle Ja, Seneb Neb. Oh, sorry. Let me actually show you guys again. I have books. Uangalifu is the main one, so make sure you guys check out Uangalifu. But of course, if you want a children's book, you get a children's book. If you want fiction book, you want a fiction book. These are amusements. Okay, these are amusements. All right, and that's it. Ptah Htp, Uncle Ja, Seneb Neb. Amen. Ma'at. Dua. Nature.